Hey, welcome everybody to part 3 of our 5 steps of purchasing your home. And this one is all around planning and preparing. It might sound a bit boring, but I actually think you'll like this one the most of all. It gets down to quite practical stuff. So let's dive straight into it. So just as a recap, the summary 5 steps that we're going through. And so as I mentioned, part 3, getting ready. So just as a recap, in the previous step, we now know our economics. So we know pretty much our price range, what we haven't got our pre-approval yet. That's in progress, so that's all been submitted with the bank typically. But at this stage now, you really start looking. So let's just jump in here. Now, there are 2 real aspects to planning and preparing. One is that if you're not ready for a pre-approval yet, you might have work to do on your financials. And again, that's why that previous step was so good, because you can now know what you need to do if there's any tidying up of your finances that you need to do for before you actually apply with the bank, and I'll touch on that. And then the second aspect of it, which is where it goes back into your court, the exciting side, is to start shopping and look for your particular property. So if you're at the stage where we can't apply for a pre-approval straight away, this is why it's so important to have that previous step done before you go to a bank. Because as soon as you put an application into a bank, it'll show as a decline, and it just doesn't look good on your credit report. So it's always good to be prepared for that. And look, just to really simplify it, the banks are just looking for stable earnings from a reliable source, so you guys don't have any problems with that, but also responsible care of your fund, of your money as well. So they'll go to your credit report and look at that, and if there's late payments, and they'll go through your bank statements and everything else. If there's bounce payments, it's just not a good look, and all sorts of things, where you're spending your money and how. And so that's the first overall aspect. The second one is, please just disclose everything up front, whether you're applying to a bank directly through a broker. It actually doesn't matter. Don't think that if you've forgotten a debt that it won't be found. Banks have all sorts of databases and ways to access information, so that's really important as well. Just if you're still preparing for a pre-approval, the last 3 months are really key, and the bank does require all your bank statements, including all your bank transactions. They'll look at your pay slips, they'll look at your living expenses, and they'll look at your credit behaviour. I'm not going to use this video to go into any more than that, but it's just basically what I came back to before. They're looking for your earnings, how they're made up, which we touched on in the previous step, and that you're managing your money responsibly. I'll leave it at that for this video. Now, let's switch that over now. If you have, you're ready to go ahead and get a pre-approval. In the meantime, you can start beginning your property search. This is where it gets more interesting for you. So start off with what I call desktop research. I'm going to go through something soon I developed called the property funnel, which I think will be helpful. But a lot of things that people start, where do we even start? So if you're living in a city, even a regional area, and you've got a wide scope to look for, I always think of this as the 4W. So where do you want to live? And I'm going to just use Melbourne as an example, still in this group. The majority of people are from Melbourne, sorry to everybody else, but the same applies no matter where you live in what city. So where are you going to look? So if you're living in Melbourne, you want to think about what side of the city you want to live on, where that makes sense. Again, I won't spend too much detail on that, but where your friends, your family, your whole lifestyle, you become sort of a little bit committed. And let's face it, work's a big part of that as well. What type of property you're looking for? That's the classic house versus townhouse versus apartment, a different discussion than what I'll cover here. This is important as sort of why you'd want to look at that particular property, but also why not. So why not might be things, and I'll do a separate video on this, but when you go to a particular area, does it look different at nights, or excuse me, middle of the day or whatever it might be. You might look for reasons saying, well, that looks a bit dodgy or whatever it might be. So that's just an overall thing. I've developed this over time, and many find it useful. It's quite generic in terms of its advice. I'm not saying you need to stick to this religiously, but let me just go through what it is. So we've determined our budget. We did that last time. We're in the pre-assessment approval. So now you know your price range. And then the first step really is to do that online research I just mentioned. So Domain or Real Estate, both got the same properties on them these days. Put in your price range and your criteria in terms of what suburbs you're looking for, prices and type of property, so on. These are it might spit out you'll spit out 20 odd properties. And again, please, that's not a rule. Just to give you an idea of of relativeness here that you think are worth looking into a little bit further. At that stage, you want to think, well, what ones are we going to go in and look at here physically? I'm not saying to look at 20, but you might be looking at 7 to 15 type of properties. I know it sounds a bit daunting. The key thing here is to have checklists, just like you do at work. But if you're going to look at properties at different times, different weekends, and so on, you want to make sure you're comparing and not overlooking things. So if you're saying, you might want a 2-car garage or something like that, then you might look at a property a week later and say, did that have that? And you got to go back. So you want to have those checklists. Just schedule those. I know work commitments is a bit of a thing. Most of these go up on a Saturday. And just get a sense as well of the origins of the interest in that in the property. Ask the agent questions. Don't tell them anything. And again, time for that's a separate video. But there you're going to find the properties that look interesting after that. You'll then do further research. You'll start to develop a short list down to 3 to 5 properties that you really like. That's about as much research as you'll do while you're getting your pre-approval. So I'll stop there. I'll touch on that, the rest of the funnel next time. So you're down to 3 to 5 properties. That's what I wanted to cover on the step 3. So it's all about being prepared. If you're not ready for pre-approval, just look at those finance steps. Reach out if you need any discussion or help on any of those. And also giving you a way to think about searching for your property as well. In the next video, we'll cover off the purchase side and the settlement. We'll see if that's it. Bye-bye.